I'd like to take you through the dramatic final round of Norway Chess 2025. Better late than never. So if you remember, Magnus Carlsen led by half a point ahead of Gukesh going into this final round. So the world number one and the world champion neck and neck right to the end. So I want to take you through the two games that really decided the tournament. So we have Erigaisi against Carlsen and Caruana against Gukesh. So I'm going to look at these games in two separate videos. Starting with Erigaisi Carlsen. So it's a Queen's Gambit declined, and Erigaisi goes for the exchange variation. So very standard stuff, but it's a very tense position. Although we've had an exchange of pawns, you can see, well, all the other pieces on the board. And this can lead to really complex positions. And I tell you what, this game was complex from start to finish. Very much in Erigaisi's style, actually. You know, he's a really adventurous player. He really goes for it and doesn't mind kind of slightly unorthodox positions. And that's definitely what we got here. So there are various ways that White can play this. But instead of going for the kind of queenside minority attack, Erigaisi has put his knight on e2 and plays f3. So this is how Botvinnik used to do it, and Kasparov, for example. So it could be that White pushes forward with e4. Sometimes you can even go g4, depends on the position. And the way that Carlsen plays this queenside counterattack has really become popular only in the past 10 years. It was always thought that this was quite anti-positional, but it's been shown that, you know, this can be a bit disturbing for White, driving away the knight, and possibly later on breaking with c5. You know, it's actually quite nice to gain some space on the queen side. Queen c2 and rook e8. Yep, that's where the rook needs to be on the semi-open file. And, well, previously we've seen bishop f2 in this position, sort of playing it, you know, very tight, just, you know, waiting. But typical Erigaisi, he just wants to push forward, e4. He thought a long time over that move. And it is very risky, actually. So Carlsen thought for over 10 minutes and played b4, pushing the knight to the side. And then he took on e4. And if you play e4, you have to realise, of course, that the king is now a little bit exposed on this diagonal. You always have to watch out for moves like knight g4 and indeed tactics based on the loose bishop on h4. And that's exactly what Carlsen has here. He has knight takes e4. So if bishop takes knight, then bishop takes bishop. That's okay for black. So bishop takes and queen takes. Now, you can see the knight is now defended by queen and rook. But black hasn't won a pawn because of queen takes c6. But at least black has been able to break up those centre pawns. And, as I mentioned earlier, there could be a chance to counterattack against the king. But this is basically a big mess. You can see, you know, there's lots of pieces are hit. There's this semi-open file here. It's such an unusual position, or such an irrational position. This is really all about tactics now. I mean, for example, it's very easy for black to go wrong. This rook is attacked. If rook a7, then rook takes f7 is a stunning winning move. Queen takes bishop c4. We can understand that one, winning the queen. And if king takes, bishop c4 check. And knight f4. And there's no good defense to knight f4. No, it's a knight g6 mate. So let's go back here. Queen takes c6, just played. Carlsen went for knight ef6, which is probably okay, but well, there were kind of interesting alternatives there. But listen, there's so much in this game to look through. I'm just going to plough through. So he allowed the rook to be taken. Queen e3 check. Queen takes d3. So for the moment, Carlsen is the exchange down. But this queen is a long way from... Well, it's not clear whether this is a strength or a weakness. And the king's a little bit exposed. Knight f4, queen takes d4. So Carlsen has one pawn and a bishop for a rook. Rook d1, but I have to say at first glance this looks pretty pleasant for white. The queen is getting pushed around. Here Carlsen makes a mistake. He played queen e5. We'll look at this in the game in a second. He should play queen e3. Actually, well, it's still just a very messy position. If rook c1, then knight e4. And you can see there are threats here. And basically, black has decent counterplay there. But queen e5 isn't quite as active. In this case, there's trouble here, but knight g4 just isn't working here, basically. So knight f8 played, and that bishop is trapped. Rook takes. Carlsen does survive with this move. Queen takes f4. I mean, it's a mad position. If rook takes, of course, then rook e1 and swift back rank mate. And now there's really only one good move for white, and that's queen a6. I mean, that's quite an extraordinary move in itself. If the rook moves away, then black can exchange and play knight g4, and that's actually winning for black. I mean, it's mad. Both, yeah. I mean, the king is a little bit exposed, but queen a6 saves white, and actually is good for white. At this moment, Carlsen decides to give up his queen. If queen e5, then rook takes. The queen comes back with an extra exchange. And white is in control here. The king is safe. It's clear advantage to white. So Carlsen decided to give up the queen. And rook c8. I mean, when I was looking this during the game, I just thought, well, this looks lost. Lost for black. Rook and knight and pawn against the queen. So it's rough material parity. But this queen can zip over and take these pawns. And I thought, well, this must be winning for white. But watch what happens. Probably is very good for white. I mean, I just thought black was lost here. But what Carlsen does over the next few moves is quite extraordinary. He played g5. So this is the start of the counterattack. And then knight c4 was played. I mean, it still looks pretty nice for white, but watch what happens. g4. So Carlsen just lunges forward with his pawn, and basically it's all about exposing white's king. Erigaisi played, to my eyes, a very normal human move. Just making sure that knight is protected. The computer prefers king h2 and thinks that white still has a very clear advantage, but I mean, that's very hard to determine in a game. Anyway, b3 looks like a decent move, but Carlsen exchanged and played rook h5. And then he just brought the king up the board. That means there's going to be no surprise checks on the back rank. Queen b7. I mean, it still looks to me like white is doing quite well, but actually at this point the machine says that black is already level, incredibly. Knight g5, and now the counterattack really starts in earnest. Knight d6. But still, I find this very hard to believe because, white has chances here to attack black's king. Rook takes. rook d3, but it turns out that the two knights and the rook are a really potent attacking force. But listen, on every turn, black can get it horribly wrong here. But watch what happens. Check. Knight e7 check, king h5. And the king finds some kind of safety staggering up the board, protected by these knights. Queen takes b4 played by Erigaisi. Again, looks pretty normal to take a pawn, but after this, apparently black is winning. The computer recommends queen b5. Let me take you through a possible line. Rook d2, check. Rook a2. And the computer thinks this is level, basically. Or another line, rook d4. Okay, this protects that one. Check. Knight g4. You can see these are quite dangerous. But this one, according to the computer, should end in a draw. But, I mean, this is so obscure. It really is. In any case, Erigaisi played what looks to my eyes like a very normal move and just took on b4. But after this, black just gets fantastic coordination. You know, the knights protect each other, so that means the queen can't do much against them. The king is pretty safe, actually. Okay, let's just see how dangerous this trio is. Well, what about a4? Then a check. Knight g3, knight f3, mate. Happens very quickly, so that's why king f1 was played. And after rook d2, so got to be very careful. This mate could be happening again, and that's why queen b5 was played. So it means that that knight is now pinned, so that one can't move. Okay, here is where I'd like you to have a think. And I'm going to have a drink. The move that Carlsen played was good, but he missed a win here. Now, this would be impossible to find during a game, but it is a very beautiful move, which is why I'm going to stop and give you a chance to find it. It's a real computer move, but it could be from a study. It's beautiful. Okay, anyway, you have a think. Time for me to have a drink. Carlsen played rook d1 check. f5 is a wonderful winning move. So the first point is that it breaks the pin, so that this knight can move into the action. So, for example, if knight takes f5, check, check, and the queen drops, knight fork. So that's the first thing to note. So that knight is now free for action, and there's trouble. Okay, so what about moving the queen out of danger? Let's try. Well, queen takes f5. That also loses instantly to knight g3 and knight fork. Okay, so instead let's move the queen. What about queen c6? You never know. It might be quite nice to check here. Now, there's actually a couple of moves that win, but let's go with king g4. Okay, the king helps with the attack. Rook f2, knight f3, let's keep going, check. Now we want to be able to play knight d4, but the rook is on prise, so first of all rook e1, and then we've got a knight fork from e5. Check, and wins the queen, black wins. So what a fantastic winning move, but yeah, I mean, during a game, almost impossible. Particularly when you're really short of time, and Carlsen was short of time. In fact, Erigaisi had quite a time advantage. I think it was something like a 10-minute time advantage, whereas Carlsen was getting close to nothing, close to playing on the 10-second increment. But he gave a check and gave another check. So he won himself 10 seconds each time he played that. And then he moved the king in. Incredibly, the king is pretty safe because it's covered by those knights. So Carlsen could take a draw with king g3, but he played on, which is brave because the knight comes into the game now. But actually the king is pretty safe. Rook takes a2, queen d7. And at this moment, as I said, Carlsen was basically playing on the increment. And I'm sure he didn't want to do this, but he decided that he should be very careful, and he forced a draw, repeating the position. If he'd had more time, he might have been able to sort of gather his thoughts here, and actually black is still doing very well. Not an easy move to spot. King e5, because sometimes it's nice to actually use the king to attack the enemy king. It's a nice helper. But in fact, this is really strong. So one of the points is that, apart from the mate threats, black actually threatens to win the knight with a simple pin. So that's a problem for white. And once the knight drops, then black is winning. And after this, knight f3. If king d1, then that would win the queen. And if king f1, knight g3 mate. Not an easy move to find, king e5. I mean, there are other variations there, of course. It's fantastically complicated, but it is winning for black. So a draw, and then they went into an Armageddon game, and that proved not great for Carlsen. Erigaisi so dangerous in these sharp positions, and so Erigaisi playing white, and it was a roller coaster. In fact, Carlsen might still be okay after pawn takes pawn, but it went king e5, queen takes, and knight d4 mate. Carlsen was checkmated in the Armageddon game. So that meant that Carlsen picked up 1 point, Erigaisi 1.5 points. So turning to the other game, Caruana against Gukesh. Gukesh still had a chance to win the tournament. That was an incredible game, the Caruana-Gukesh game, and I'm going to look at that in a separate video. So do join me for that one.